No one expected it. The moment a powerful female CEO, known for commanding boardrooms with an iron will, broke down helplessly at 30,000 feet as her baby's cries shattered the silence of the cabin. Passengers groaned, the crew froze, and the woman who once bent corporations to her will couldn't calm the tiny child in her arms. Then, out of the shadows, a rugged single dad stood up. What he did next silenced an entire plane, left even the crew speechless, and revealed a truth so raw and human that no one on board would ever forget it. The red-eye flight from New York to San Francisco hummed with the low, steady drone of engines and the occasional rustle of passengers adjusting themselves for the long night. In business class, where dim golden lights glowed softly overhead, Amelia Torres shifted uneasily in her seat. The 42-year-old CEO of a rising tech firm had faced boardrooms filled with hostile investors, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Her 1-year-old son, Ethan, pressed against her shoulder, had erupted into uncontrollable sobs. His tiny fists beat against her chest, his cries piercing through the stillness like shards of glass. Amelia's composure, the iron mask she wore daily, began to crack. Around her, passengers groaned. A man muttered about lost sleep. A woman pressed earbuds deeper into her ears, while a flight attendant crouched politely, offering toys and warm words that barely touched the storm within the child. Amelia's hands shook as she rocked him, her silk blouse damp with his tears. "Please, Ethan," she whispered desperately, though her voice trembled with exhaustion and shame. She felt the sting of tears at the corners of her eyes. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was Amelia Torres, the unshakable CEO who negotiated billion-dollar contracts. Yet here she was, reduced to a mother who could not quiet her own son. From 2 rows behind, a man rose slowly. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed not in a suit but in a simple gray sweater and worn jeans. His face bore the kind of rugged lines carved by years of responsibility and sleepless nights. His name was Daniel Hayes, a single father who knew the language of midnight cries better than most. The cabin's whispers hushed as he stepped closer, his eyes calm yet intent. "May I help?" he asked gently, his voice carrying the steady tone of someone who had weathered storms far darker than this. "Yes." Amelia stiffened, clutching Ethan tighter. Pride flared. Why should a stranger succeed where she, his mother, had failed? But Ethan's sobs only grew louder, racking his tiny body, drawing stares like daggers from every direction. Her defenses wavered. Reluctantly, she let Daniel take the child. To everyone's astonishment, the moment Ethan rested against Daniel's chest, his cries softened, then slowed. Daniel began to hum, a low, soothing lullaby, the kind of song that smelled of baby soap and warm kitchens, the kind mothers and fathers sang when the world outside threatened to collapse. Ethan's small body relaxed, his hiccups fading as his wide eyes fluttered shut. The entire cabin fell into silence. The irritated passengers leaned back, stunned, as if a spell had been cast. Amelia watched, her throat tightening. She should have felt relief, but what surged within her was a cocktail of gratitude and humiliation. She had given Ethan life, yet a stranger's arms seemed to hold the power she lacked. Whispers rippled across the aisle. "He's better than the mother," someone murmured. Each word pierced Amelia's pride, her heart aching with a mix of shame and longing. She had fought her way to the top of the corporate world, only to realize she stood at the bottom when it came to the most sacred role of all. Daniel remained focused, swaying gently with Ethan, his calloused hands supporting the child with practiced ease. His eyes flicked toward Amelia, soft but unreadable, as though he recognized a truth she hadn't admitted to herself. Strength in boardrooms didn't always translate to strength in silence at 30,000 feet. The flight attendant returned, her lips parted in awe. "Sir, that was remarkable," she whispered. The passengers nodded, some even offering apologetic smiles to Amelia. though their earlier judgment still lingered in the air like smoke. As Daniel lowered Ethan back into Amelia's arms, the baby stirred but did not cry. Amelia's breath caught. She pressed her cheek to her son's hair, inhaling the sweet scent of innocence mixed with the faint musk of Daniel's sweater. Her heart thudded, a reminder of how fragile her facade truly was. For the first time in years, she felt small, vulnerable, almost human again. She glanced at Daniel. He had already stepped back toward his seat, his movements quiet, unassuming. Yet his presence remained, filling the space with an unspoken message. Sometimes healing came not through control or power, but through surrendering pride and letting another's strength steady the moment. As the plane soared into the midnight sky, Amelia clutched Ethan close, her eyes following the stranger who had, with a single act, unraveled the carefully built armor around her soul. She did not yet know that this encounter was only the beginning of a journey that would shake the core of who she was. A journey of trauma, justice, and the fragile hope of healing. The cabin lights dimmed further as the flight pressed deeper into the night. Amelia held Ethan close, though her arms still trembled from the weight of her earlier humiliation. She felt every whisper replay in her mind, each glance of judgment echoing louder than the hum of the engines. She closed her eyes, and like a tide breaking loose, memories she fought to bury began to surface. Years ago, before her rise to the pinnacle of the tech world, Amelia had been a different woman, a wife who once believed in balance. She had poured her youth into late nights at the office, into building a company she thought would prove her worth to a husband who measured her by absence rather than devotion. When her child was born, instead of celebrating, he accused her of negligence, telling her she would never be more than a CEO on paper, not a mother in flesh. The sting of betrayal burned even now. His departure, his hand on another woman's back as he left, had left her hollow. Every business victory since then was laced with the bitter aftertaste of personal failure. She opened her eyes to the dim light of the plane, only to find Daniel's steady gaze resting on her for a moment before he looked away. Daniel, too, was adrift in memories. As he sat back in his seat, the scent of Ethan's baby soap still lingered on his sweater, pulling him into the past. He remembered nights when his wife, Claire, would rock their daughter in her frail arms, whispering lullabies with a voice weakened by illness. He had promised her he would raise their child with tenderness, but when cancer stole her from him, Daniel had nearly drowned in despair. He had stood alone in courtrooms, fighting for medical support, advocating for workers like himself who had no voice. His hands bore the marks of labor, but his heart carried the heavier scars of grief. Helping Amelia tonight had not been about kindness. It had been instinct, muscle memory etched by years of fatherhood and loss. As Amelia adjusted Ethan's blanket, her eyes caught a faint shimmer, a worn piece of cloth Daniel held loosely in his hand. It was a handkerchief, its edges frayed, embroidered with tiny blue flowers. She saw how his thumb traced the pattern, as though drawing strength from it. He noticed her glance and offered a half-smile. "It was my wife's," he said quietly, voice carrying a weight too heavy for casual conversation. "She used to sing the same lullaby I hummed tonight. Somehow babies trust it." His words struck Amelia like a cord plucked too close to her own wound. She thought of the nursery she had decorated alone, the nights she had whispered to Ethan through exhaustion, never certain if love could truly reach him through her fatigue. The turbulence hit suddenly, jolting the plane. Ethan whimpered, then burst into sobs again. Amelia's body went rigid, fear rushing in like a flood. Before she could panic, Daniel leaned forward, his eyes steady. "He hears your heartbeat more than your voice," he said gently, holding out the handkerchief. "Try singing to him, even if your voice shakes." Amelia hesitated, her pride clawing for control, but something inside her gave way. She pressed Ethan to her chest, inhaled his warm scent, and with a voice trembling like glass about to shatter, began to sing. The melody was uneven, raw but drenched in love. Ethan's cries slowed, then softened, until only his tiny breaths filled the silence. Passengers turned in astonishment, watching as the woman who commanded empires revealed the cracks of her humanity. A flight attendant pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes glistening. Amelia's voice wavered, then steadied, until the lullaby filled the cabin like a fragile thread stitching together all that had been broken. For the first time, she felt not like a CEO failing at motherhood, but simply a mother, imperfect, vulnerable, yet enough. Tears spilled silently down her cheeks as Ethan drifted into sleep. Daniel leaned back, his eyes never leaving the scene. He had seen courtrooms fall silent when truth was finally spoken. But this silence was different. It was reverence, a quiet acknowledgement of a woman facing her deepest fear and refusing to turn away. For Amelia, the shame that had bound her began to loosen. For Daniel, the ache of his own loss softened, just enough to breathe. The turbulence passed, but the moment lingered like an indelible mark. Amelia held Ethan tighter, her heart pounding with a mix of relief and revelation. She turned toward Daniel, her lips trembling with words unspoken. Gratitude, respect, perhaps even the fragile beginnings of trust. He simply nodded, the faintest hint of a smile touching his face, as though to tell her that strength was not about never faltering. It was about finding the courage to sing through the storm. The hours passed, and the plane sliced through the night sky, carrying with it a cabin full of passengers now more subdued, their earlier irritation replaced by a hushed respect. Amelia kept Ethan nestled against her chest, his breath warm and steady. She thought she had finally found a fragile calm, but fate was not finished with them. Without warning, the aircraft shuddered violently, trays rattled, and gasps erupted from every row. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling as turbulence tore through the cabin like an unseen monster. Ethan startled awake and began to wail, his cries rising above the chaos. Amelia's heart leapt into her throat. Panic pressed against her ribs as she clutched her son, her mind flashing images of disaster, metal tearing, fire, loss. Her body froze, muscles locked in fear. For a woman who had faced down billion-dollar mergers, this helplessness was unbearable. Daniel rose instantly, bracing himself against the overhead compartment as the plane lurched. His voice cut through the panic with a steady calm. "It's all right. Just turbulence. Hold him close." He moved to Amelia's side, shielding her and Ethan with his broad frame. The sight of him, unshaken, resolute, steadied her breath, though tears blurred her vision. Passengers clung to their seats, some whispering prayers, others crying out. But Daniel's calm presence created a pocket of safety around them. The turbulence dragged on, each jolt a cruel reminder of fragility. Amelia pressed Ethan against her heart, whispering broken words. "I'm sorry, baby. I'm sorry." Her voice cracked. For the first time in years, she let the mask fall completely. Her shoulders shook as tears slid freely, landing on Ethan's soft hair. "I thought I had to be strong alone," she admitted in a whisper meant only for Daniel, though in that moment, the confession was as much for herself as for anyone. "But I don't know if I can do this." Daniel's eyes softened, and in the dim light she could see the ghosts of his own battles flicker there. "You already are," he murmured. "Strength isn't about never breaking. It's about breaking and still choosing to hold on." He reached out, placing the worn handkerchief gently over her hand. His touch was warm, steady, as though passing her the courage his late wife had left him. The plane jolted one final time before leveling out, the seatbelt light flickering back to calm. Passengers exhaled in relief, the cabin filling with nervous laughter and muffled sobs. But for Amelia, the real storm had been inside, and it had finally broken. She kissed Ethan's forehead, her tears mingling with the scent of baby soap and innocence. For the first time since her husband had left, she didn't feel entirely alone. As dawn crept across the horizon, the first blush of light seeped through the small oval windows, painting the cabin in soft gold. Amelia glanced sideways to see Daniel watching the sunrise, his expression caught between sorrow and peace. Ethan, finally soothed, slept soundly in her arms. The image struck her deeply, like a flower blooming after a long night of storm. The kind of fragile beauty she had forgotten still existed. When the plane touched down, passengers shuffled to disembark, their phones already buzzing. Amelia caught snippets of conversation. That single dad. The way he calmed the baby. Someone recorded it. Within hours, she knew, the video would spread beyond the confines of the flight. Whispers of judgment had turned into admiration, but Amelia no longer feared the spotlight. She had faced a truth deeper than public opinion. At the gate, as travelers streamed past, Amelia lingered with Ethan on her shoulder. Daniel walked ahead, shoulders squared, ready to disappear back into his quiet life. Something inside her resisted letting the moment vanish. Gathering the courage that had once built her empire, she called out softly, "Daniel." He turned, surprise flickering in his tired eyes. She stepped forward, slipping a simple card into his hand. Not with the weight of her CEO title, but as a woman offering gratitude. "Thank you, not just for him, but for reminding me what strength really is." Daniel studied her for a long moment, then offered a quiet smile, the kind that held both sorrow and hope. He didn't need to speak. His presence was enough. As Amelia walked away, Ethan stirred and nestled closer, his tiny hand clutching at her blouse. She kissed his head, her heart lighter than it had been in years. For Amelia, this flight had begun as a humiliation, but it ended as a revelation. That justice could be as simple as kindness, and healing could begin in the arms of strangers. For Daniel, it was another promise kept to his late wife, that he would keep carrying love forward, even into the lives of those who needed it most. And for everyone on that plane, the memory of a single dad and a powerful CEO brought to their knees by a child's cry would linger, proof that beneath titles and wounds, it is love that steadies the world. In the end, this was never just about a crying baby on a late-night flight. It was about the fragile line between power and vulnerability, about a mother who learned that strength is not the absence of fear, and a single dad who proved that love carries its own quiet justice. Their paths crossed in turbulence, but what they left behind was a message for all of us. Healing often comes when we dare to let others in, and true strength is born in compassion. If this story moved you, we invite you to subscribe for more soul-stirring tales and share your own journey in the comments, because sometimes your story is the light someone else is waiting for.